Wait, Evan, do you not like coffee? Or do you just not drink it?
No, I don't like it and I don't drink it. Never developed a taste for it. Just never could get into coffee. I'm not really a tea drinker. I think we've talked about this.
Oh, you only like hot chocolate.
I don't often drink hot beverages.
You only like hot chocolate and mushy cereal. Yes, I remember.
Yes, you've got me.
Never going to forget that.
The mushy cereal burned in my brain.
It really is. I don't bring that up because I enjoy it.
No.
I bring it up because it's there.
Because it's in my nightmares.
It's the big bowl of cereal in the
room. Guys, what are we going to talk about? The big mushy bowl cereal?
We're not going to talk about it because I'm in the corner actually eating it.
It's okay. Evan ate it. Don't worry about it. It's gone.
Welcome to Spoiler Peace Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network, and I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Dave Riedel. I sometimes write about movies for Salt Lake City Weekly, and I am also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, I am.
We three are all members. Anyway, we've got some movies to talk about this week. As always, we're going to be talking about 4 of them, in fact. We are going to lead off with The Dark and the Wicked, which is a horror film. We are going to talk about Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist, which is a documentary.
About a horror film.
Yes. We're going to talk about the documentary Time, and we are going to round out the show with Happiest Season, which is a holiday film, and I know we're all very excited to talk about it.
Indeed.
Well, speak for yourself, Jesus. No, it's fine.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. Stay tuned to see if those are real shots or if they're blanks.
What is happening? The show's already gone off the rails.
I know. I apologize. It's my fault. As usual.
So I'm very curious to hear about The Dark and the Wicked because Dave in a text message said it scared the shit out of him. So
no, I think I
not
said
exact quote.
It scared TF out of me.
That's true.
And for somebody who, you know, as Evan's mother would say, has a master's degree in swearing or whatever it was she said I had.
Effortless.
Effortless. It comes effortlessly to me that TF, I must have actually been really scared if I had to abbreviate it. So I am just going to throw this out there, Megan, and say, I don't know how many Brian Bertino movies you've seen. I've only seen The Strangers.
I have seen none, so this was my first. I know. The Strangers has been on my list for a long time, and I just haven't. So yeah, this is my first.
I don't love The Strangers the way lots of people do, mostly because home invasion movies to me are kind of boring, except for Your Next.
Your Next is amazing, but I disagree.
Yeah.
I think home invasion movies are great.
I mean, I think they're great when they're done well, but I mean, once you've seen home invasion movies, you're like, yeah, it's good, and then you see Your Next, and you're like, no, nothing's this
Well,
good.
that's true. It is amazing. It is a brilliant.
So
The Dark and the Wicked.
Yeah, yeah, which doesn't take place in Massachusetts or Maine or anything. I know the word "the wicked" is in the title, but
oh my god,
they're talking more about like evil than
wicked evil.
Yeah,
if it was wicked evil, that would make sense that it would take place in Massachusetts, but just the wicked. No.
It's wicked.
The wicked.
Yeah. So here's the 10-cent tour. This family patriarch is dying at his family farm. The kids come back to help mom care for him, and weird shit goes down and starts picking them off one by one.
Well, the important thing to know, you're totally right, Dave, but the important thing I would say also is that the mother told them, don't come back. Very explicit.
That's true.
And they did.
She tells them,
oops,
don't come back, because mom, before the kids arrive, like 10, they're adults, I should say, Marin Ireland, and I think it's Michael Abbott is the actor's name, who plays her brother, Michael.
Michael Abbott Jr., you are right.
Thank you. Marin Ireland, whom I have always liked her work. You may last have seen her as one of the adult daughters who isn't Anna Paquin in The Irishman. Anyway, they show up. Mom has already told them, we're about 10 minutes into the movie at this time, and weird shit has been happening where Mom has been hearing things, and then you kind of see like a human figure running through their goat herd, right? When they're all in the barn for the night. And then the kids show up and Mom's like, I told you not to come. And then Mom cuts off her own fingers while she's chopping carrots.
I knew that was going to come, and that was still such a scene.
Yeah. And
like
then
all of them in one go, or like
she cuts off all fingers on one of her hands. Yeah.
Damn.
And then she keeps chopping, and then she hangs herself in the barn.
Yes.
So, and they find her
Yikes.
the next morning, and she's expired.
But I love the way they, quote, find her. They find her chopped fingers first in the kitchen.
Right. Right.
Ugh.
So they're like
Right.
out and running outside being like, Mom, where are you? And then they find her. Yeah.
Whoa. I'm kind of glad my screener didn't work, because otherwise I would have been watching this during dinner.
Yeah. Well, you know, finger stew isn't for everybody, but
Oof.
then the kids start seeing things. Marin Ireland sees her dad, like with the glassy eye thing, and he's in it. Like, I don't know if he's in a coma, but he's immobile.
Yeah,
he's lying in bed,
if not an actual coma.
right? And the home healthcare aide is there, and she's just like, "Yep, he's dying." And so Marin Ireland sees her dad while she's in the shower. He's like just standing there, and of course, then he's not there. And then the brother Michael sees their dead mother in the yard, and then she starts to like float up into the sky after she's turned on the lights in the middle of the night a couple of times. And he's like, "What the fuck? I'm trying to sleep."
Damn it, Mom.
Yeah.
Also, not believe. If I remember correctly, he doesn't believe her at first when she's like, "I saw Dad," and he's like, "Yeah, sure you did," or something like that.
Right.
Which is so dismissive, and of course, he doesn't believe her. But then, oh, whoops! Then he starts seeing things too. So
right. And so they make this weird plan. Well, we should talk about the priest who shows up.
Oh yes, Xander Berkeley.
Man, is that scene creepy?
Why is there a priest there?
Who knows?
You don't know. He just shows up and he says he knows their mother, and he starts saying things about her and her like religious things, and they're like, our mother didn't believe in religion or God, and they keep saying that's a through line. They keep saying that film that she didn't believe in God, she didn't believe in anything, she didn't believe in religion, and yet here we are.
Yeah, and the priest says, I'm gonna not quite get this right, but he says something to the effect of, "You don't believe in God. You think a wolf cares if you believe he's a wolf?" and I remember in a lesser actor's hands, that line would not work, but there's something about the way he says it with this kind of low growl / smirk in his voice that is just like, because he's evil. It's clear that the priest is bad news. And the way he says that is just like, "Oh my God, get out of the house. Get out of the house right now." But they don't, and then everyone dies.
Well,
so.
but then he shows up again, like at 3 a.m. and
Right.
it's like, come outside, come out.
Yeah, but then he does the disappearing trick, you know?
But then there's the great part where I can't think of her name, Marin Ireland's character, Louise, thank you. And she calls the priest, and he's like, "What are you talking about? Who are you even talking about?" And she's like, "You were here. You were just here at my house." And he's like, "Where are you?" And she's like, "Texas." He's like, "I've never been to Texas." And then
I'm in Chicago.
Yeah. And he starts talking about his daughter who died. And he's like, "Why would you harass me like this?" Like, it's an intense phone call.
Her name's Louise. You sound just like her. This is terrible what you're doing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know how I always say that horror movies get less creepy the more they explain?
Mm-hmm.
Movie goes the opposite way. This movie's just like, we're going to leave this opaque.
Yeah. Yes, it does not really explain anything. And I actually liked that a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I felt really, really, I knew that Louise does get hers from her father in the end, or whatever possesses him, I guess. But I felt bad for Michael, because Michael leaves like he's supposed to. Yeah. And he goes home and he finds his wife has murdered their daughters. And he's like, "No, no. And then he cuts his own throat. And then the wife and daughters disappear and the kitchen is clean. That's where he found them, in the kitchen. And as he's dying, he realized he's been had by whatever this thing is that's out to get his family. And then his very alive wife and daughters walk in and find him, and his wife just, you know, one of those. And you're just like, yeah, that's... The wolf really doesn't care if you think it's a wolf.
Yeah. This is an interesting possession film. Very different than other possession films I've seen.
Yeah. I thought it was like, I mean, it had a few too many jump scares.
Okay.
But it also had some non-jump scares that were just, when the priest shows up at 3 a.m. and they shine the flashlight in his face and he's got the glassy eyes. I actually wasn't expecting that. I thought it was just the priest being creepy.
Yeah.
You know?
Same.
And then it's like, oh no, possessed priest, extra creepy. It's kind of like being extra crispy, but creepy. So anyway, and then the poor home health care worker who says she's a believer, she tries to, like, she gets sort of possessed and she's fighting off whatever it is that's trying to possess her. And she picks up Louise and tries to get her out of the house. But then she can't, and then she stabs herself with a couple of knitting needles in the eyes, and she's like, Jesus will protect me or whatever, and then she collapses in death.
But even before that, something really interesting is that because she's a believer, she has a candle, she has a Virgin Mary candle, and she's lighting it and she's praying, so she's clearly trying to help. And whatever's the possessing the father, it's like, nope, fuck you.
Yep. Yeah. And it's weird. You can see her, she's fighting it because you can see a tear running down her face at one point, and this weird spider motif that keeps cropping up. But then this smirk comes over her face too. But then she tries to save Louise after she bashes Louise's head in. So, which doesn't kill Louise, it just knocks her out.
Yeah, there's clearly a struggle happening, an internal struggle.
The one thing that I didn't quite, I mean, what's to understand? But the one thing I didn't understand at all was how, like, the guy who worked for their family, I think his name was Charlie, how he got wrapped up in it. Because weird possessed mare in Ireland, Louise, shows up at his place and, you know, says all kinds of crazy things to him, and then he blows his own head off, and it's like, how did this happen? And then I forgot
I was
about
gonna say,
this.
wait, I don't think she actually was there. I think he just hallucinated her. I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was under the spell of whatever is going on at that house. Is my
I will
point.
tell you why I think that. Because the camera kept having close-ups on the cattle skull, which, by the way, there are a lot of cattle skulls in horror films this year. But yeah, they kept showing it as almost like a face that's like watching. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I almost got the sense that like anybody who entered the house and like saw that, they would then be, you know, like haunted, possessed, what have you, because Charlie was there at the house too. So
yeah,
it's also really creepy.
That could
his
be.
granddaughter shows up and like she seems super nice and like lovely, and then she's like super creepy in the house.
And then she's evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, Evan, this is kind of a great. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of, what was that movie? I always made the joke that the tagline was, but it drives an Uber during the day. It comes at night.
Yeah.
It comes at night, but it drives an Uber during the day. It kind of reminded me of It Comes at Night, because you never quite see what's out there. You only get little hints and flashes of it, and nothing is really, well, in It Comes at Night, I think it's some kind of virus. But in this, it's just like good old fashioned possession, I think. Who knows?
You're right. That's the thing. We're not even exactly sure. There is no mythology, which I really find refreshing. And there's no explanation. You're just kind of along for the ride. And it's very slow when it starts. And it's very, except for the hand chopping, or finger chopping, it's a very slow burn. And it's very atmospheric and moody, and the cinematography is quite beautiful. And yeah, I really loved the visual aesthetics, along with the fact that it doesn't explain anything.
Yeah, I appreciated that. And I also, when you see a really good horror movie, you appreciate just how hard it must be to act those scenes when there's like probably 15 people standing 7 feet away from you who are like not scared at all.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be like more or less tearing your hair out. So
Marin
good on you.
Ireland is really great in this.
Yeah, she's
She's always great.
So that, I mean, I don't have anything else to say unless you do, Megan.
No, I think the touches of religion are kind of interesting, but it ties back into, not explaining the mythology. And yeah, I thought this was a really interesting horror film.
Yeah, I dug it. And even though we've described it as there are some kind of bloody moments, but it's actually not nearly as bloody as you think it would be. The knitting needles in the eyes, that's a lot.
A throat,
but
that's bloody.
Yeah, but there are whole big gaps of this movie where it's just dread that you're feeling. You're not, yeah.
I also kind of thinking possibly because we watched Relic, a few months ago, I was also thinking about the themes of the movie in this and how, the siblings are caring for their ailing father, and their mother had been caring for their ailing father for so long. And I was wondering if, and again, I might be reading too much into it, but I kind of felt like the dread and the kind of like you can't escape it and it keeps haunting you, kind of possibly like how it is when you are, caring for someone who's ailing or dying. There's kind of like nothing you can do. You can't escape it. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, or if it just happened to be the plot point, but I thought it was kind of an intriguing way to look at that situation.
I had a similar yet different read on it. And I kept thinking of afterward, I kept thinking of No Country for Old Men and the idea that evil is inevitable.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. Which I think that they say that more or less explicitly in No Country for Old Men. But in this, they don't. It's just like, nope, it's happening. Get used to it. Oh, you're dead.
Yep, can't escape it.
Yeah, so
cannot run it.
Yeah. So that's the dark and the wicked. So
cool. You've definitely piqued my interest. So I'd like to see this at some point.
Yeah, it's available on demand right now. So
Sweet.
you can see it wherever.
So then while we're on the topic of horror, it sounds like In Possession seems like a natural transition to talking about Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist.
First question, do we need another explication of The Exorcist? And when it comes from the horse's mouth, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, just even if you don't learn anything new, and I learned a lot of new things in this.
I did too.
I found this incredibly fascinating to listen to Friedkin talk about his process, talk about what inspired him, talk about all facets of the film. I love kind of behind the scenes, listening to filmmakers talk about their craft as a general rule. And yeah, I thought this was great. So even if you've seen, or read tons of things about The Exorcist, even if they're, you think you know everything, I still think that this is really a fascinating look at the film.
Totally agree.
Yes, I would agree. On paper, this sounds like it could be a bad concept because it's, it's one person talking head documentary. It works, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's William Friedkin and he's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
He has a lot of energy. He has a great wit. He's very funny. He's self-deprecating. I love the elements where he says like, yeah, guys, like I was just trusting my instincts on this. There wasn't some master plan here. I was just going with my gut. So, people have asked me, what's the symbolism of that? I don't know. Well, that wasn't my plan. I was just making a movie.
Yeah. I love how he's talking about when they opened the movie in northern Iraq. He's like, we just had Max Cito just like walk around this open air market and it looked good, so we put it in the movie with some creepy music. It's like, and there you go. Now it's an iconic horror movie, Speaking
of that, not the opening scene, but the end scene. I love how he really delves into the meaning of it and what William Platty wanted. And he's like, I'm not satisfied with this ending. And he's like, I'm not sure what it means still. And I think so humble yet confident in yourself that you're not afraid to admit that you made a mistake, or you're not afraid to admit that, you're not sure if it all works. I think that's quite commendable. Like, it was really refreshing to hear that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. He comes across as very humble, and he has a good sense of humor about himself. But I think another reason that this documentary works is I think it's well edited. I think it's put together in such a way that when he's talking, you get clear examples of his influences artistically, the films and the paintings. When he has like a whole section where he's talking about Caravaggio and Rembrandt and how their artwork influenced some of the cinematography in the
backgrounds
film,
in particular,
and lighting.
And yeah, I love how that's edited in. And one of my favorite things about it is they'll often introduce something he's talking about before he starts talking about it. And so like he kind of meets the visuals in the middle.
Yeah.
And I thought that was done very effectively to get your attention focused on whatever that next subject is. And then as he starts to talk about it, then it becomes relevant because it's already been on screen for a beat.
Totally agree. And I was thinking of watching this. I was thinking of the Brian De Palma documentary and how I don't think that's a very good documentary, but I find it a fascinating documentary because Brian De Palma is so fascinating. And I think that what Alexandria Phillips did here, and that you just spoke to, Evan, that was so smart, was having those visuals where it doesn't just stay statically on, Friedkin the whole time. It like goes up with other films and inspirations and what have you. And I found the painting conversation one of the most fascinating, and possibly also because Kelly Reichardt, and when in an interview for First Cow, she also, like behind the scenes, she also talked about paintings influencing her. So maybe that's why. But yeah, but the way influenced by music and paintings and how he would wander around museums, I just found that absolutely riveting.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah, it was just really interesting. And you really feel like you're delving inside the artist's mind. You're really getting a look or exposure that you wouldn't get in a typical interview. It's really, in a lot of ways, this is kind of like the ultimate director's commentary on The Exorcist, but it's not obnoxious in the way that I think sometimes directors' commentaries are. I don't often watch them because like I'd rather either watch an interview or behind the scenes thing or just watch the movie. But I think this is a good combination of him talking about the movie and them showing you the parts in the movie that he's referring to, or kind of giving you the kind of inside scoop on.
Yeah. I also think this is interesting. If you've seen interviews with William Friedkin before, to watch him kind of become more humble over time, because he used to be kind of this big swinging dick. I can do no wrong because I'm William Friedkin. Ha! And now he's kind of like, when we did the French Connection and we could have killed people in that car chase and that was stupid, So I appreciated watching him as, however, when did it come out? 73. So, 47 years later talking about this, and how much of it is still so fresh in his mind, by the way. But also, how I appreciate what you said, Megan, about when he says, I don't think the ending works so well. Like the fact that you can say, this is maybe the best mainstream horror movie ever made. And you're going like, I don't think I got it right. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that, because I have said this for years, I've had this argument for years with people, that the demon, for whatever reason that we don't understand, enters him, leaves Regan, enters him, and then by the time he jumps out the window, it's not entirely clear whether he's still possessed. It looks like he might not be. And I appreciate, because I have people like, yeah, he's possessed. That's why he jumps out the window to kill him. Like, yeah, but how would, is the demon going to jump out the window? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, come on. So I liked that whole bit of conversation, because it's like, finally, someone agrees with me, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
And it's the filmmaker, God damn it. So
you're right all along.
Yeah. There's just this documentary is just chock full of things. I'm just trying to think about things that I feel like are worth mentioning. And I feel like there's a lot. So I'm trying to like self-edit as I'm looking over my notes and say, okay, what's the stuff that like really people need to know?
Well, I just appreciate the way they scored it, you know, that they had these temp tracks, and you hear directors say this a lot, but what was really interesting was how you got to hear the unused score.
Yes.
And how it really doesn't work. But motherfucking Tubular Bells, man, does that work?
Yeah. Again, that's a testament to the editing once again.
Yeah. And also we got to see or hear the unused score for 2001. And man, that I feel like when you're watching that, it's like, I don't know if 2001 would have suffered so much if it had that score instead of what it has. But man, you'll never forget the opening of 2001 because of that music.
Yes.
So,
agreed.
Yeah, there's just a lot of really smart choices during the making of The Exorcist. And it would be really fascinating to watch him do some of his movies that are either A, misunderstood, or B, just plain bad. Like Sorcerer, which is, I think, misunderstood. Cruising, which who knows what the fuck that movie is. Deal of the Century, starring Chevy Chase, and To Live and Die in LA, all that stuff. I'd love to know all of it, you know? Friedkin, man, is he intense, by the way. I feel like I was being shouted at for an hour and a half.
See, I didn't have that experience.
No.
Really?
I enjoyed it.
Oh, I enjoyed it too, but I'm just like...
I just found it really passionate, which I actually really appreciated and enjoyed, but I didn't like, yikes, he's yelling at me. But yeah, but I mean, I didn't actually know a lot about the making of or the behind the scenes. So for me coming in, I found all of it really fascinating. Like I found it fascinating when he was, and disturbing when he was talking about the woman who voiced the demon, Mercedes.
Oh, Mercedes McCambridge.
Yes, and she was drinking, even though she was a recovering alcoholic. Like that was very
and drinking raw eggs and smoking cigarettes like a chimney. Yeah, it was that was some intense work required to create that demon's voice.
Yeah. And also, you get to hear a snippet of Linda Blair doing the dialogue in her own voice. Man, that's weird.
It was very weird.
Yeah. And then when Friedkin's like, and you're hearing a 12-year-old girl say this, and you're like, it's weird. It's like, yes, it is weird.
It was super weird, but I loved hearing about that. I loved hearing him talk about the subliminal cuts and the subliminal sounds, like the feeling, and like all of that was really interesting. I also found it again disturbing but fascinating, where he talked about how George Stevens would have a gun on Diary of Anne Frank, and he would just randomly shoot it off to keep on toes, and then that's what he would do too.
Yeah. Or slap his actor that he knew he needed to cry, and the guy couldn't cry, so he's like, "Do you trust me?" Yes. Smack. Now go on camera.
But I also I wouldn't get away with that now. No shit.
Yes.
Yeah, you're kind of lucky you got away with it then. I mean, it's true. That's a lot.
Yeah, I also, something I found interesting, and I keep thinking about this, that something I'm surprised he said. He talked about Max von Sydow and how he wasn't able to do a particular scene, and he was like, because he didn't believe in God or didn't believe in religion, and he's like, I don't understand that. It's acting. Why can't you just do it? And I'm like, you're a director. I feel like you should understand that a lot of actors need to draw from actual truth, and like they're not like, a lot of them are not just pulling things out of thin air. They're pulling from their own experiences or their own feelings. And like some of the best actors do that. So that kind of surprised me. But I love that he had that where he talked about that whole part, because I found that really interesting.
He did have a caveat to that, though, if you recall. He said that there is maybe the reason Mox, I love that he pronounced it Mox.
Thank you. I couldn't.
Maybe the reason Mox was like that is because, he's such a subtle actor by nature that it was just hard for him to get there. And I'm like, it could be.
Yeah, I don't think that's it, but
yeah.
But no, but again, I do like that he's so opinionated, but he will always kind of couch it with, but maybe it's something else, or maybe it's something different. And I think that comes with wisdom. There's something else I really found interesting. Speaking of that, is I loved his talk of grace notes and how moments of grace, punctuated throughout the film and other films that really speak to the human experience, and talking about like the trick-or-treaters and the nuns when Ellen Burstyn's walking down the street. And I love that the documentary ends with him talking about a Zen garden and what it actually means being separate, and how we all live separate and through this world, and we're all really alone. And I'm like, that's a really depressing thought, but it's kind of a profound one nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yep.
I felt like I was sitting at that Zen garden pondering life just like him. So it sounds like we all really like this. Is there anything else we want to say before we shift to talk about time?
No, except on the Blu-ray for Sorcerer, which is the next movie that William Friedkin made, which is a remake of Wages of Fear. He does some good talking about how they made that. And Sorcerer, I find to be highly underrated and super tense. So
yeah,
I've been meaning to check that one out.
I think the only other thing is just right from the beginning, I found it a really compelling discussion where he's talking about fate and how you can't really control what happens, and that's really what The Exorcist is about. And I think it's so funny. I mean, it's been a very, very long time since I've seen The Exorcist, but I thought of it more as faith and like a crisis of faith, and and what do you do when you lose your faith? And I always thought of it more in that way, and not really about fate and how you can't escape, and how he talks about how all the three characters, Reagan and the two priests, are on this collision course. And I just the fact that he thinks so deeply about this, I think is really, like I said, refreshing, and I love hearing about it. So yeah, I think there's so many more things to say, but just suffice it to say, it's a great documentary. It's really interesting and really well done. And this is also by the same director who did, Memory, The Origin of Alien, which parts worked, parts didn't for me. And then who also did the Psycho shower scene documentary too.
Right.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, this was great. I actually want to watch it again because I found it so interesting.
Yeah, I would.
The Exorcist or the documentary?
The documentary.
Both,
but but more the documentary. I found it just really, really, really fascinating on filmmaking and influences and inspirations and themes and all of that.
Yeah. Oh, and just to tie it into The Dark and the Wicked from earlier, that is a family that doesn't have any faith. And I would like to say very pointedly, in The Exorcist, Ellen Burstyn says, we're not a religious family, blah, blah.
Yes. So
interesting parallels there. Yay. Okay.
Yep. It's after watching the documentary, I thought about all of that while I was watching The Dark and the Wicked.
Yep. Totally.
Okay. So let's move on then to Time, which is a documentary. And I guess I'll just read the Amazon Studios plot summary. Fox Rich is a fighter. The entrepreneur, abolitionist, and mother of 6 boys spent the last 2 decades campaigning for the release of her husband, Rob G. Rich, who is serving a 60-year sentence for a robbery they both committed in the early 90s in a moment of desperation. Combining the video diaries Fox has recorded for Rob over the years with intimate glimpses of her present-day life, director Garrett Bradley paints a mesmerizing portrait of resilience and radical love necessary to prevail over the endless separations of the country's prison industrial complex. And I'm out of breath.
Well, that was actually a lot of stuff I was going to say. No. That was a very thorough description. It was very good.
Yes. So, I don't have a ton to say about this one because I'm just going to come out the gate and say I didn't really like it that much.
Oh.
So if you guys did like it more, I'd like to hear your thoughts about it.
I did like it.
I did like it. Megan, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay.
Well, I got to collect my thoughts. So
yeah, this is a very, I feel like I'm overusing the word interesting tonight. This is a very interesting documentary because I feel like there are a lot of layers to it. I mean, there's a lot of layers to the situation. And I found this an incredibly moving documentary. I cried many times throughout this. And I particularly loved the editing. I loved the way it fluidly moved back and forth in time. I love that we see her personal, home videos interspersed with Garrett Bradley's, really great documentary work. Yeah, and I found it a really intriguing look at the passage of time. Like I couldn't help but think of like Boyhood, and how that also shows the passage of time. Obviously, that's a fictitious film, but obviously the actors really did age. And here we are seeing that with her children and her boys, and how we keep going back and forth between them being very young to being teenagers, and much older, and back and forth. And it just, to me, it was a really moving look at how the prison industrial complex robs families, especially impoverished families and especially families of color, of time and of their freedom. And I think that this is really, really illustrates that.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And I also thought the way in which it was made, even I feel like now there's kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a trend or a trope or what you would call it, but you can see it in the William Friedkin documentary. The subject and the director seem to have like an on-camera rapport. One of the director's off camera, but in this movie, even though you feel the filmmaker, you don't see the filmmaker, you don't hear the filmmaker. It's just our main character, for lack of a better, it's a document. She's a real person, but it is a movie. It's just her really doing the talking, narrating, and how the movie moves back and forth between her home movies and the present day, and how it's just like, I think that the title Time is just kind of like a really good, this is what time feels like. This sort of, it's not a line, it's not finite, it's a journey. And sometimes, sometimes you're not sure where you are or where you're going, but it's fascinating nonetheless. That sounds kind of trite, but
no,
that's the whole.
It's true. I think that is what the film is predicated on. I think, Dave, you really is a really great point about the rapport between. It's so interesting because she's Sybil, but she's also Rich Fox. So I'm going to call her Sybil. But it's interesting, I think, the rapport between Sybil and Garrett Bradley, and how it's very clear, you're right, that they have a rapport because, the conversations where Sybil's like looking at the camera and, and talking, it's, again, it's possible that she was talking to one of the DPs or the DP or one of the cinematographers, or she could have been talking to Garrett Bradley, who knows? But yeah, but I think you're really nailing what I think moved me about the film.
Yeah, I felt like this movie, it's shaped, and even though it feels a little loosey-goosey, but it does that, I think it's done on purpose to kind of make you feel like, all right, well, so we're in this horrible situation where we're trying to get dad out, but life goes on. But then the next scene will just be like some oppressive, court thing that they lose. And you're like, oh, and how there's so much space around everything in this movie, but the space at the same time, it's almost suffocating because it's just like
there's that scene where she's on the phone waiting to hear about a judge's ruling, and normally a film would cut away. We don't cut away. We just sit there for like 3 minutes waiting with her, and it is suffocating. It's oppressive, and all this time and time wasted and time she has to jump through hoops and all of it. And and I think I think I think it's also showing how much her husband is missing, like how much he's missing her, growing and developing, and, because she's, become a public speaker, and how much he's missing of his children and how they're doing. Yeah, it's just,
And also I thought it was interesting, like when he finally comes home, which we should mention, happy ending, if you can call it that. It seems like the two youngest boys didn't realize he was coming home that day. And so, did you guys get that feeling? They're just like, oh my God, he's here in the living room,
Yeah.
And they were
kind of a surprise.
Yeah. and they were super psyched. Anyway, I also appreciated the humanity of this movie and the respect that it had for its characters.
Yes, I want to point out something, and then I want to hear, Evan, your thoughts and what didn't maybe work for you. But something that I thought was a very, very interesting and very smart choice is because I did not read the premise. I actually did not know what this was about at all. I went in not knowing anything. And I think it was a very smart choice to not reveal that they were bank robbers until about like 15, 20 minutes in. So because I'm already feeling bad, I'm already feeling like, oh God, this is so tragic. And then that's revealed. And I feel like for some people, if they knew that straight out of the gate, that might inhibit their empathy for what's happening. And it shouldn't, but it might.
Interesting.
I think that's a great point. I think it is a smart decision for them to do it that way, because I agree. I think that would turn people off. I mean, I think we're conditioned with this type of documentary to really just expect that it's a wrongful conviction. And so we're just fired up over the fact that someone was wrongfully convicted and put away for 60 years. And so I agree. I think kind of dropping it in later that this was a situation where they did actually do the thing that they were, charged and convicted with does make it kind of a different ball of wax, I think, for some viewers.
So, Evan, what didn't work for you, or what did you not like?
I think I was put off by some of the artistic choices in a way that made this movie really difficult to watch. Like, I was not a fan of the black and white. I didn't love the score, the piano music. It felt mismatched and too whimsical to me for what I thought was more of a kind of serious subject. And while I did appreciate its respect for its subjects and its comments about the passage of time in terms of, being able to see that in the context of present day and the home videos, it just didn't come together to me in an effective way. Like, I think just right out the gate, its kind of stream of consciousness just really, it caught me flat-footed in a way that just made me feel like I never quite got on board with what was going on. And so it just made the whole thing kind of a trudge to get through.
Wow.
If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I mean, stream of consciousness is definitely a good way to describe the narrative, which I don't think that I got across very well. But it worked for me. So, hey.
Yeah, no, it definitely worked for me too. I guess I'm really surprised by the music because I thought it was perfect. I loved it. I loved its kind of the piano bluesy notes to it. It felt like it was very appropriate to where they lived. It felt like it just worked for what was happening. And it did have, I don't know, I guess whimsical maybe is a good way to describe it. But again, to me, that kind of weirdly matched with how time moves. And I don't want to say flippancy of time, but for lack of a better word, the flippancy of time. It just, so for me, it really worked. So it's so interesting how the same exact thing, obviously just we feel so differently about it. It's just so intriguing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I have so little to say about it, because I feel like I started watching it and I got put off by some of those choices so early that even though I tried really hard to get into the movie, I just couldn't wait for it to be over.
Oh, wow.
Oh, sounds like it was a long 81 minutes of your time.
Yes, it was a long 81 minutes. And I feel bad saying that, but I was so put off so early on that it just made it hard to recover despite my attempts to.
The valiant effort.
All right. I'll buy that though. I mean, hey.
So should we, if we don't have anything else to say about time, I think we should talk about Happiest season, which I think we've all been pretty anxious to discuss.
Yeah.
Not me.
Shush. You are excited. You know it.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah,
all right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, grump. What are you gonna say? Humbug next?
No.
Well, Megan, do you wanna give us the synopsis on this? I know you're probably the most excited of us to be seeing this movie. It's a highly anticipated movie.
I am. I've been excited about this ever since I heard about it. Yes, very. So this is Clea Duvall's film, and she co-wrote it and directed it, and it stars Kristen Stewart and Mackenzie Davis as a lesbian couple. So this is a queer holiday rom-com, yay! And they are a lesbian couple, and they are going home to meet Mackenzie Davis's family. Her name is Harper. Abby is Kristen Stewart's character. And as they're about to arrive at on the road trip, Harper reveals that her family doesn't know that she's gay. And so she has she's asking Abby to pretend to be straight and that she is straight. And hijinks ensue.
Yeah.
Hijinks. Yeah.
I mean, that's
Some
my quick down and dirty description, but
no, I think that's a great description because it is in a lot of ways, what you would expect from a holiday film of this kind of like a rom-com. Like there's some elements of zaniness and slapstick, but there's also some really emotional moments in the film.
Yeah.
It's a good mix of it, I would say, of those kinds of moments. And there's some echoes of movies that we've seen before, but I love that this is a story about two lesbian women, and in that way it's about being queer, and I love that aspect of the film, and I think we'll talk about it later, but I think that comes together really well toward the end of the film.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yay!
So I'm gonna just I loved every fucking minute of this movie.
Me too.
Which I kind of figured, unless it was like gonna take a big shit, I probably would. Because I've always liked Clea Duvall as an actor, and I figured, she's got a lot on the ball. She's not going to make a shitty movie, which she did not. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see Kristen Stewart not doing a lot of her Kristen Stewartisms. That was cool.
Okay.
Oh, did you feel them in there?
No, I don't know what you're talking about, because I love Kristen Stewart, and I think she's amazing in everything.
I think she's great. I think she has, like a lot of actors. It's not specific to her. She's got some stuff that she does in more than one movie.
Sure.
And not necessarily movies that take place in a what do you call it? Like a series. Because I haven't seen any of the Twilight movies.
Oh, I was like, I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that was kind of his qualification.
Yeah.
He was going for.
But you know what I really liked? And this is just kind of a minor thing. Well, okay. First, I'm going to say that I kept waiting for something horrible to happen. And when I mean something horrible to happen, I don't mean the big scene
which is horrible.
Which is horrible, yes. I knew that something like that was going to happen. I was prepared for that.
A forced outing.
Because I think I've been so conditioned to see queer people brutalized in movies, I just kept waiting for something horrible, like physically, to happen to somebody.
Right.
And I'm really glad nothing did, but I wish I knew that the whole way through, and I should have fucking known that. That's my baggage. But I also fucking loved Aubrey Plaza in this movie.
Yeah, Aubrey Plaza is amazing.
She was amazing. And I'm kind of like, I run hot and cold on her. I thought this is like the best work she's ever done.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
It's very restrained.
Yeah. So oh my God, there's so much to say about this.
I know. So, there's a lot of ground to cover.
So much to cover. So speaking of Aubrey Plaza and Kristen Stewart, and Clea Duvall, and Daniel Levy and Victor Garber, like
Daniel Levy's amazing.
Daniel Levy is a gem and a national treasure. There are so many queer people in this film, and I love that. I love, so Aubrey Plaza is bisexual, Kristen Stewart is bisexual. Victor Garber is gay, although he plays a straight man in this. Daniel Levy's gay. It's so, and Clea Duvall's a lesbian. Like, it's so wonderful to see a film that is a queer film made by queer people, starring queer people. It's so refreshing and so lovely. And I don't know about you guys, but I was sobbing from the opening credits, where there's the kind of Norman Rockwell meets Hallmark card illustrations of what's happening. And it's this jaunty, music of, full of gaiety and, Christmas cheer. And I'm sobbing because I have never seen a queer holiday film that's so joyous, or really many queer films that are so joyous, because so many are, Dave, like you said, they're very rooted in, brutalizing queer people's bodies, or if they're not doing that, they're very rooted in tragedy, or they're very rooted in, breakups or something horrible.
Right. The tough stuff.
Yes, which that is all necessary, and we need those stories told too. But we very much need these warm, fluffy rom-coms. And, straight people you guys have had your representation for far too long. It's about time that we queer people get our representation in the warm and fuzzy categories cinematically. So this was already just a breath of fresh air to me, just right out of the gate. And then the performances are lovely. All the performances were just pitch perfect, spot on. I think the writing is incredibly well done. Yeah, this was just a lovely delight.
Yeah. I agree with almost all of that. I think, like a lot of rom-coms, even the best rom-coms have their tropes.
Oh,
and I feel like this one in the end, it gets wrapped up a little too neatly, because
Yes.
Victor Garber even says, he's like, you're going to have to give me, some time and I'm going to put in the effort and I will make mistakes. But then you see him making no mistakes.
Well,
Yes. But I will say, I feel like even though I recognize that it was wrapping up kind of neatly, for some reason, I feel like I really needed this movie.
Yeah.
And its ending was kind of like all wish fulfillment. It was just so nice to see a family that very quickly realized how wrong they were and how they treated each other, both in how the parents were constantly playing the children off each other to compete for their affection, and how Mary Steenburgen as the mother and Victor Garber as the father were way too obsessed with perfection and image and how they represent themselves to others. And I know it was Pat. I know it was wrapped up too neatly, but for some reason for me, it was the ending I needed. I needed people to see that they were wrong, recognize that quickly, and pivot and become the people that they needed, that their family members needed.
That's right. We need wrapped up tightly happy endings too. So I say bravo to the wrapped up tightly ending. And it's funny. I know what you're saying, Dave, about how, Victor Garber, he says he's going to need time and then doesn't, and then he's like, does the right thing right away. I'd like to think maybe because it's fresh in his mind, who knows, maybe 2 months later, he won't do the right thing. But I really appreciated that statement is in there, because if that line wasn't in there, I might have been like, oh, that feels a little fake or a little forced. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I would have felt it. Whereas when he says that, I was like, wow, I really appreciate the acknowledgement that it does take time, that you don't just bounce back right away. You're not always going to do the right thing. And that just was really comforting to me.
Yeah. What it reminded me a lot of was on, Megan, have you seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
I've seen some episodes, and if you're talking about the one where Rosa comes out, I have seen that.
Yes, it very much reminded me how Danny Trejo, who plays her father on the show, when she comes out as bisexual, how that kind of is a progression. Yes. Like he has a horrible reaction to it at first, and then like he takes like a little bit of time. Then he's like, you know what? I'm working through it because I love you, and your mom's going to take more time, and we're going to make mistakes, but like ultimately we're here and we're in your corner. And that's kind of the same kind of vibe.
I didn't think the mom was in her corner, but that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
I've seen that episode and I barely remember, so I'll take your word for it, both of you.
Yeah, but I know we're like, I'm going to jump to the end or almost the end, but I have to say, so the outing is horrible. The forced outing by Alison Brie, who, by the way,
that is exceptionally cruel.
She is exceptionally cruel, and she plays this perfectly. She's so good at being cruel. But yeah, so Harper's sister, they're fighting and she outs her, which is god awful and is such a boundary violation and is so disgusting and gross. And after that, when Abby is outside talking to John, and played by Daniel Levy.
I love that
played by
scene.
Daniel Levy. Yeah. And it's the most beautiful scene. And she's like, she's upset because, Harper's still in the closet and she won't tell her family and she's taking it personally. And he's like, it's not about you. It's about her. And, how did your parents react? And she's like, oh, they were so supportive and they said they loved me. And he's like, yeah, good for you. He's like, I was kicked out of the house for 13 years, I love that scene talking about how everybody's coming out story is very, very different, because it is very true, and how everybody's family is going to react differently. And it's such a beautiful speech, and it's so well done. And
he plays it so well.
He does.
And
he's wonderful.
What I really loved about that scene is, even though he's, telling her, hey man, come on, get with the fucking program. He's not telling her, hey, get with the fucking program. It's very tender.
Yes.
It's just like, you just have to consider that her family's totally fucking different from yours. And and he's not judging her or whatever. He's just like, hey, just think about this.
Right.
Right. And he's not telling her you have to take her back either.
Right.
Because Kristen Stewart, her character, Abby, she's been through a lot of shit in this movie.
Yes.
And Harper has asked a lot of Abby and has been very unfair to her in a lot of ways. And so, I don't know, I found myself feeling like, she's totally justified breaking things off. And some of these things being deal breakers, like not telling her what was going on until they're on their way there, the way that she's forced to, sleep down in the basement, not have any privacy. She's not spending any time with her. She's, ignoring her. There's just, she forces her to go to the mall by herself with the sister and the sister's kids. Like, there's just so many unfair things that are asked of Abby in this
They really
film.
do pile up,
And
huh?
Yeah, they do.
yeah, in a way that's like, those could all be deal breakers. So yeah, I love that Dan Levy's character is not insisting that she should go back to Harper. And I love that speech. It's so beautifully acted and so well said. And it just probably, I think for me, the most moving moment in the film.
Without question.
And although I really did like this movie, I think for me there were some moments that were uneven, but pretty much from this point on, it was just perfect all the way through till the end.
Yeah.
Like from that speech through to the end, I was just like on board, like with everything.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to, and that's what we're here for. I was like, if I want to pick something I don't like, I am not someone who loves like slapstick, and so I really didn't love their fight where they're crashing into the Christmas tree and the painting gets broken. Like, to me, that took me out of the film. But everything else just worked so well that I was like, well, that's it's rom-commy. Okay, I was willing to overlook it. But yeah, I think there's just so many great moments, and I also really like that Riley, Aubrey Plaza's character, and Abby have this kind of great friendship. And like kind of unexpectedly, and like she doesn't make a move on her, and I love that. Like I kept expecting that because it's so rom-commy, and I was like, no, don't make a move on her, and she didn't, and they're just friends. And Riley tells Harper like she's a great woman, like which is just, it's true, and it's just so nice. And I think they were kind of like you, Dave, when I kept expecting, against my better judgment, that something was going to go horribly awry. It didn't, and it was just really nice. And I know I've said it before, but it's very refreshing.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'll be glad to watch it a second time, which I totally fucking will, and probably a third, fourth, and fifth. Because like, the only things that didn't work for me in this, really, aside from the wrapped up with a bow ending, which, okay, fine. The slapsticky stuff didn't really work for me either. I felt like this was more, this movie's really funny, but even though it's like presented as a rom-com, it felt more like a drama to me that's also just happens to be very funny, like on purpose. Because this is a really serious subject at its core.
Yeah, it is.
And you can see Mackenzie Davis is so good. That scene when Kristen Stewart comes in the morning is like, what the fuck, man? You got home at 2 a.m. You're being a dick. And she's like, what are you doing? And she just is, you can kind of tell she's high school Harper, she's stuck. And you can just see like the torment on her face being torn between who she is and who she's playing. And that's kind of what I mean when I say it feels more dramatic than comedic. But
oh, for sure.
Like the other slaps, like getting stuck in the closet with the Roomba. It's like, all right.
So then Mary Steenburgen can say, "What are you doing in the closet?" Like,
exactly. It's like, all right.
But see, I don't think of rom-coms as funny. I actually never think of them as being funny. I think of it as more a visual aesthetic. Like they have cheery music, and they're going to be women-centric, and it's going to focus on love. So to me, it's more those elements rather than, oh, it's funny.
Oh, I got it. I'll go along with that. I also want to say that the way that Mary Steenburgen plays mom is like
so good.
It's so good. And it's one of those, everybody has known this person. It could be the mother, it could be the father. You have known this person where they say the most horrible cutting things with a smile on their face.
Right. Like the way she calls Kristen Stewart's character an orphan.
Yes.
Her parents.
Yes.
I know.
Are dead.
I know. And she's like, well, I didn't grow up in an I was 19. And I was like,
oh, you're one of the lucky ones. I love that she says that. Like, oh.
Yeah.
I thought the dynamic between all three sisters was a little forced, but that happens in rom. You got to have in a family like this, when you're competing for attention, you got to have the sisters at each other's throats. Except for Jane, of course,
who's lovely.
Who is just like the nicest person, and they just shit all over her because they don't know what to do with somebody who's so nice.
I know. And I love that she's a fantasy writer. And she paints, and I love Jane.
I put 100 hours into that painting. I actually
worked out.
Yeah, I actually kind of think that as much as the outing scene is, and then I agree with you, Megan, that the whole like knocking over the Christmas tree and destroying the painting, I think what redeemed that scene for me, though, was that they were able to bring Jane into that in a way that didn't it could have felt totally wrong. But when she's saying, I put a lot of work into that painting and no one ever pays attention to me. And it's like, yeah, hey, I just watched her get ignored for an hour and a half. She's absolutely right. You know?
What I love after that is when the party's over and, you know, and then Victor Garber's like, oh, you know, Sloane, Alison Brie, he's like, you shouldn't be lying about your sister, you know, lying that she's a lesbian. And, you know, she says like, no, you know, I am a lesbian. I'm in love with Abby. And then Alison Brie admits that, you know, she's getting a divorce, you know, from her husband. And then I love that Jane's like, I don't have any secrets, but I'm an ally. I was like, that's a funny line. That was great.
Yeah. And
that was funny.
The three of them literally stand together, if you notice, too. They join each other and form a kind of, you know, a wall to face their parents. Yes. And that is a really nice moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I will say the one about that scene, though, is that I'm like, are we really going to equate being, you know, not being out of the closet as like a secret, like the same as getting divorced? Like that felt a little off to me.
Yeah.
Especially since the whole theme of the film is about authenticity, being yourself, or being afraid to be yourself, all of those things. I'm like, really? We're going to equate that? So that kind of felt to me. But again, so many other things worked so well. I also really love that Harper, and this happens earlier in the film too, which bolsters what, or rather Dan Levy, what he says later in his beautiful, eloquent speech. It bolsters what Harper says earlier to Abby when she's like, you know, I'm not scared. You know, she says something like, I'm not scared of you. I'm scared to be me. And again, she's highlighting the fact that, you know, coming out has nothing to do with Abby, but it has everything to do with her. And, you know, and you can't rush that. You really have to be ready, you know, to come out. And the other interesting thing too, that the film, I love that it's so much about coming out, but something kind of interesting that the film doesn't quite address, which is fine. But coming out for many people is not just a one-time thing. You come out many times to many different groups of people. And so
yeah.
Yeah. I thought about that a little bit, but not a bunch. I'm glad you brought it up though, because you're right. Yeah. I think, you know, if it weren't so late, we record this podcast late at night. I think I would probably, like, when we wrapped, I'd watch it again.
I'm thinking about watching it again tomorrow. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Do we have anything else we want to add about this film other than the fact that we all really enjoyed it?
It'll be on Hulu, and you should see it.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, it will actually be the day before Thanksgiving.
Day before Thanksgiving.
When it comes out on Hulu.
Yep. I found this, just like I said, so lovely, and I cried a lot through it. But they were tears of joy. They were lovely tears, and I want to see more films like this. I want to see more films that are joyous, that are jubilant, that are dealing with tough topics, but maybe with a lighter touch, and that are centering queer people and queer, you know, families and queer couples. And, you know, 2020 has been a shit show year, and this was just exactly the balm I needed for this holiday season.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait to watch this multiple times, because it's delightful. And I love the chemistry between the two. Oh my God, I didn't even talk about that. But anyway.
Yeah, they're really good together.
They do have really nice chemistry.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's do a quick recap. It sounds like we should see The Dark and the Wicked.
Yeah. It's out now. I think that it does what a lot of horror movies don't do well, which it sustains dread right through to the end. So that's a yes in my book.
I think there are a lot of horror films that do that, but I still think that this is one worth seeing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It looks like it's available to rent on demand in a few different places.
It is.
So definitely check that out. So then the next we would say Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist. That's available on Shudder, if I'm remembering correctly.
You are remembering correctly.
Yeah.
So if you have Shudder, definitely check that out. And if you're not on Shudder and you're a big horror movie fan, I also recommend checking it out, because there's a lot of good stuff on Shudder, and they do a pretty good job of rotating things in and out.
And Shudder is inexpensive comparatively to a lot of streaming
great
services.
Great point, Dave. They are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like $5 or $6 a month.
It's right now. It's $5.
Yeah. So definitely check it out. Also, Megan, you'll be happy if you didn't already know that Lost Boys, I believe, is coming this month, or if it's not already there. So
well, I own Lost Boys,
that.
but trust me, I will be also watching it on Shudder because why not? But yes, definitely see this documentary, though. It's a great documentary, and definitely get Shudder.
Mm-hmm. And then Time is available on Amazon Prime for folks that have it. I think you guys know where I come down. It sounds like both of you would recommend it, though.
Yes.
I would, yes.
And like we said, Happiest Season is going to be available on Hulu, and it comes out on the 25th, so just before Thanksgiving. So yay, excited for that.
Yep.
And that just about does it for this week's episode. So I want to start with a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Clamor. Thank you so much, Otto, for making us sound good every week.
Thanks, Otto.
And we really appreciate you.
Otto.
And you can find the show anywhere you can get podcasts. You can also find us at our website, which is spoilerpiece.com. We're all over social media. We're on Facebook. We're at Spoilerpiece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. And if you want to get in touch with us, you want to tell us we're wrong about a movie, we missed something, you just want to say hi, you can reach out to us in a couple ways. You can send us an email, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call.
862-21-PEACE.
Call up the Spoiler Piece hotline, leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you. And if you like the show, please rate and review us. Go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. That will take you to your platform of choice. Although I'm going to say we definitely appreciate the Apple podcast reviews.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Helps more people find the show. It works into their weird algorithm to help people find the show. I don't know how, but let's just say it does. If you really, really like the show, we recommend joining our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/spoilerpiece. And you can sign up for $5 a month. You get exclusive audio each week. This week, we are talking about the 1986 film Aliens, which we had so much fun talking about.
Yeah.
And not just because it's Megan's favorite film of all time.
It sure is.
So you get exclusive audio. You get to vote in polls. This month, we're going to have a poll going up soon. If you hang out in the $10 tier, you can also pick movies for us to watch, which is, it's interesting. Patrons keep it interesting.
Yeah.
With some of their selections. We also just want to say a huge thank you to all of our patrons.
We do. We want to give a huge thank you to Bill Scahan, Bob Chipman, Charles Nash, Chris Wilkinson, Davida Margolin, Deirdre Crimmins, Elisa, Christopher Jensen, Max Colville, Mike Lord of the Sith, Rory Glynn, Sean Pensionar, Shauna Harris, Shelley M. McCaskill, Shona Glasgow, and Zach Pigeon. Thank you so much, patrons. You rock.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, patrons. And thank you for listening to this week's episode. My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston and Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
My name is Megan Kearns. I'm a contributor to Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
And my name is Dave Riedel. I write sometimes for Salt Lake City Weekly. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And if you want to find me online, I'm on the tweets, the Letterboxd, and the Instagrams as Dave Sees Movies.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.